Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of those stories the history teachers probably forgot to mention. Mostly because it's ridiculous, mildly chaotic, and yes, absolutely perfect for sleep. So, picture this. Mount Olympus, golden twilight brushing over the marble halls, and Queen Hera, goddess of marriage, protector of order, general enforcer of rules and consequences, is just done. She's out. You know that look someone gives when they're 2 seconds from flipping the table at Thanksgiving? Hera's had that look since the Trojan War. And now she's gone full treat yourself. No divine decree, no dramatic exit, just a neatly folded note on the throne that reads, "Taking a week. Don't summon me, unless Olympus is literally on fire. XOXO. You're probably thinking this sounds like a setup for a celestial disaster, and you're right. But you'll survive. Mostly because you're not one of the gods stuck in what is essentially Mount Olympus without adult supervision. So before you get comfy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. Oh, and drop your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this little sleepover spreads. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's drift together into tonight's journey. You stroll through Olympus just moments after Hera's disappearance. The marble underfoot unusually warm, as if it's trying to compensate for the sudden chill that spreads when the queen is no longer watching. The other gods don't notice it at first. Zeus, lounging in his usual cloud of peacock feathers and thunderous ego, assumes Hera's just off organizing some sacred ceremony involving olives, goats, or marital fidelity. The irony is strong. The realization dawns only at breakfast, which for immortals is less cereal and more ceremonial nectar with mood-enhancing ambrosia foam. Hera's absence isn't just noticeable, it's catastrophic. Schedules unravel, meetings are missed, offerings pile up. There's a wedding down in Thessaly that no one's blessed yet, and the mortals are starting to get nervous. A priest sacrifices a chicken upside down. Chaos. Now, here's a little historical fact to ground us. In ancient Greek ritual, Hera was one of the central deities invoked at weddings. No ceremony was truly complete without her, the queenly presence that sanctified the union. So, if she skips town, technically, no one's married this week. You know what that means? Absolutely no divine accountability for anyone's terrible relationship decisions. Meanwhile, back on Olympus, you pass by Hermes, who's already halfway through selling get-well-soon cards with Hera's face on them. Not because she's ill, because it's a branding opportunity. Aphrodite lounges in a velvet robe, raising an eyebrow. So we're unsupervised? She purrs. Ares grins. He's already sharpening his spear. You wander over to Hera's usually immaculate throne room. The place looks weirdly sad without her. A golden comb lies on the armrest. There's a faint scent of lavender and scorched judgment. A nearby note reads, "In what you assume is divine sarcasm. Good luck, darling, but not everyone is laughing." Demeter, ever the concerned motherly type, is pacing. The harvest schedule is in tatters, she whispers, clutching a bundle of wheat. Do you know what happens if no one organizes the equinox festival? You do not. She doesn't explain. Just mutters something about celestial mildew. One of the weirder details. The weather begins acting up. Subtle at first, a light drizzle inside the Hall of Echoes. Then a thunderstorm erupts from the bathtub in Dionysus's quarters. Historians still debate whether the gods controlled weather directly or influenced it through mood and ritual. Either way, Mount Olympus is having what might be described as a bit of a divine mood swing. And while the idea of Hera taking a vacation might seem silly, there are mythological hints, tiny overlooked details, that the gods had their own versions of burnout. Some even speculate that the Eleusinian mysteries, those secret rituals, hidden from public view, were actually just spa weekends for stressed-out immortals. Yes, historians still argue over that one. But let's get back to you. You meander down the eastern colonnade, watching Hephaestus frown at a leaking pillar. Without Hera's input, his workshop is running on instinct, which means everything he builds is either on fire or turning into sentient furniture. He shrugs at you, covered in bronze dust. She always knew which gears I'd forget. Zeus finally takes notice, but not in a helpful way. He bellows something about order and the sacred balance, while not actually doing anything. Classic. He's too used to Hera handling the fallout. When he finally decides to step in, it's with all the finesse of someone who's never had to manage a Google Calendar. Here's where it gets funny, or tragic, depending on your sense of humor. The gods start forming factions, like a group project gone wrong. Athena tries to bring reason, suggesting they all rotate responsibilities. Ares scoffs, proposing a strength-based meritocracy. Apollo wants to vote on decisions using a singing competition. No one can tell if he's joking. He's glowing suspiciously bright, probably from overexposure to his own reflection. Meanwhile, you notice animals behaving strangely. Owls flying in reverse, snakes forming synchronized circles. One nymph you pass tells you the sacred balance is off, and then vanishes into a jar of honey. Normal Tuesday, really. A few mortals begin to notice things too. A wedding in Corinth turns into an accidental kidnapping because the bride mistook the god of sleep for her betrothed. Somewhere in Sparta, a chicken lays an egg shaped like Zeus's nose. People take it as a sign. Of what? No one agrees. Remember that little detail earlier, the upside-down chicken sacrifice? It happens again. Different city, same bird. Historians can't explain why poultry always gets the short end during divine miscommunication. Maybe they just look too judgmental. You finally pause near the edge of the gardens, where Hera's favorite peacock sulks beneath a marble bench. Its feathers are dimmer than usual, shimmering with faint worry. You sit beside it. She'll be back, you whisper, mostly to reassure yourself. The peacock blinks. You think it nods. It's only the beginning, of course. You can already feel it, the slow unraveling of cosmic order, wrapped in ambrosia-soaked egos and golden sandals. And somewhere, far beyond the clouds, Hera is probably sipping something fizzy out of a coconut shell, pretending she can't hear the thunder. You wake to the sound of Zeus shouting into a conch shell. It echoes across the throne room like a divine foghorn, bouncing off the marble and slapping unsuspecting gods in the face with the phrase, "Emergency Family Council." You rub your temples. You don't even have temples, technically, but still it hurts. Zeus stands in the center, his beard more electric than usual, eyes wild with the unmistakable panic of someone left alone with responsibility for the first time in centuries. He's got his lightning bolt in one hand and a scroll in the other, probably Hera's schedule, which he's holding upside down. He attempts order. "I will be assuming all of Hera's duties until her return," he proclaims. Silence. Then Hermes snorts so hard he spills ambrosia on his sandals. Aphrodite doesn't even look up from her mirror. Ares claps once, ironically. Somewhere in the distance, Dionysus giggles. Here's the thing. Historically, Zeus was considered king of the gods, but Hera handled all the real admin. She dealt with oaths, marriage laws, divine etiquette, the boring glue of society stuff. Zeus, thunder, bulls, infidelity, not exactly HR material. And it shows. His first official act? He tries to reschedule 5 simultaneous weddings, a sacred harvest, and 2 coming-of-age rituals using dice. Literal dice. The fates will sort it, he mumbles. No, they won't. The fates are busy weaving reality and are absolutely not customer service. The gods begin whispering. Athena calls a quiet meeting in the Library of Echoes. This will end in a fire, she says, sipping olive tea. A literal, golden divine fire. The others nod. Except Apollo. He's writing a ballad about it. You're mentioned twice, by the way, as the one who noticed first. Here's the thing. Historically, Zeus was considered king of the gods, but Hera handled all the real admin. She dealt with oaths, marriage laws, divine etiquette, the boring glue of society stuff. Zeus, thunder, bulls, infidelity, not exactly HR material. And it shows. His first official act? He tries to reschedule 5 simultaneous weddings, a sacred harvest, and 2 coming-of-age rituals using dice, literal dice. The fates will sort it, he mumbles. No, they won't. The fates are busy weaving reality and are absolutely not customer service. The gods begin whispering. Athena calls a quiet meeting in the Library of Echoes. This will end in a fire, she says, sipping olive tea. A literal, golden, divine fire. The others nod. Except Apollo, he's writing a ballad about it. You're mentioned twice, by the way, as the one who noticed first. As the days pass, Olympus becomes creaky. Statues get twitchy. Sacred fountains overflow with tea instead of water. One even starts laughing when touched. A centaur reports that Mount Parnassus has started migrating. Nobody knows where. But the moment the panic truly sets in, that's breakfast number 4. You walk into the hall and everything's changed. No ambrosia, no music. Zeus stands at the buffet, smearing butter on a scroll like it's toast. She had a system. He growls. Why are there 15 toasters in here? Because yesterday, he asked Hephaestus to make breakfast easier. And Hephaestus, taking things a little too literally, as always, invented sentient toasters. One of them tries to bite your robe. Another is humming an ancient war hymn. You step away, slowly. This is the part where Aphrodite steps up. We need balance, she says, sliding her sunglasses onto her hair, which honestly looks great. Hera's gone, and everyone's spiraling. Let's bring in a little love, a little softness. Softness? Ares sneers. Olympus needs discipline, war, purpose. You mean attention? She snaps back. You hide behind a column. Again. But Aphrodite isn't here for debate. She launches a full-blown initiative. Her plan? To replace all daily duties with affectionate bonding rituals. She calls it Project Snugglebolt. Now here's a fun historical footnote. Aphrodite, despite her reputation for stirring passion and drama, was often invoked in domestic harmony rites, especially among newlyweds. Her influence wasn't all scandal and perfume. She also had a real interest in connection. And, as you're about to find out, very aggressive hugging. By mid-afternoon, a hugathon is mandatory. Apollo's lyre concerts are now lullabies. All interdeity disputes must be settled via gentle eye contact and hand-holding. You try to skip one, but Hermes catches you with a friendship bracelet. It jingles ominously. Even the temple offerings are affected. Priests across Greece are confused when their altars are covered in rose petals and cookies shaped like hearts. One temple in Thebes sends back a complaint. Love is not a currency. Back on Olympus, the gods try. They really do. Athena holds an open mic poetry hour. Ares joins reluctantly. His poem is just the word blood, repeated 15 times. Demeter reads an ode to a zucchini. You clap. It felt right. But it doesn't last, because love, as it turns out, does not pay the metaphysical bills. The skies over Athens flicker, not in a romantic way, but in a possible breach in time-space way. The sun rises too early. A goat starts talking in fluent Homeric Greek. Mortals begin interpreting random sneeze patterns as divine commandments. One guy builds a temple to sneezing. It goes viral. Aphrodite finally admits defeat when Dionysus turns the love temple into a dance club. I wanted harmony, she mutters, stepping in ambrosia-soaked sandals. Not disco. Disco is harmony, Dionysus says, spinning. You visit Hera's garden, where vines are now wildly overgrown, twisting into the shape of what might be a very judgmental face. You swear one of the roses hisses at you. Nature's not taking her absence well either. By now, Zeus is back to shouting. His hair's frizzy. He's lost at least 3 scrolls, and he keeps zapping random objects just to feel in control. Everything's fine, he insists, while his throne slowly rotates without him. Historians still argue over whether this period was recorded in any genuine myth, or if it was merely metaphorical chaos handed down in oral tradition. Some even believe this was part of a lost comedic cycle, stories told at feasts for entertainment. If so, it was a hit. Imagine gods behaving badly, unsupervised, covered in glitter and toast. And you? You've now become the unofficial observer, the only one not trying to rule, seduce, redecorate, or rewrite history. You're just walking through it, barefoot, probably a little tired, dodging emotionally unstable gods and snack-happy toasters. But it's not all bad. You pause at sunset. The sky is streaked with gold and lavender. Somewhere, a lyre strums softly. A peacock feather floats past, caught on the breeze. You wonder if Hera can feel the pull. If the chaos is loud enough for her to notice. If the warm glow washing over Olympus is a reminder that it's not quite the same without her. You find yourself drifting through Olympus like a polite intern at a very dysfunctional startup, somewhere between a broken lyre recital and an unsanctioned toga rave. Someone mentions that Aphrodite has officially taken over Hera's position with Zeus's blessing, or maybe just his distracted nod. Either way, it's happening. And you know what? She's committed. She calls it her Divine Glow-Up program. There are posters now. Slogans like less judgment, more hugs, and crisis is just love in disguise hang over the Hall of Judgments. You wonder if anyone notices that the giant scale of justice now weighs scented candles and macaroons instead of mortal sins. Aphrodite sits on Hera's throne, legs elegantly crossed, holding a golden clipboard that may or may not be enchanted. We're replacing discipline with desire, she explains in a meeting no one asked for, but everyone was forced to attend. Order through affection, harmony through beauty, mandatory eye masks every Wednesday. You glance around the chamber. Ares is silently seething in a corner. Athena is scribbling furiously. Hermes is handing out branded slippers that sparkle. And Poseidon? Well, Poseidon looks like he just bit into a lemon, a very bureaucratic lemon. Here's a historical tidbit for your sleep brain to chew on. Aphrodite was technically married to Hephaestus, but had an infamous affair with Ares. Their triangle was the subject of songs, pottery, and one very awkward eternal chain trap. But what often gets overlooked? She was a patron of civic harmony and protection of marriages in some local cults. Go figure. So yes, she's qualified. In a way, she starts making changes. First, all divine petitions must be written in verse. Second, mortal offerings should include something with texture, velvet, petals, chocolate. Third, any thunderbolt deployment requires a calming breath and a compliment. Needless to say, things go sideways fast. Mortals begin receiving mixed signals. A farmer in Delphi prays for rain and gets a bouquet. A sailor cries for safe passage and receives a dream of his ex-girlfriend from 5 years ago. He's confused. He writes an epic about it. It's terrible. Aphrodite, unbothered, launches the Love Ambassador Initiative. She sends Hermes to deliver scrolls to various temples, announcing a new era of divine warmth. One priest in Athens reads it aloud and bursts into tears. Another accuses the scroll of being haunted by the ghost of a failed relationship. Possibly true. You follow Hermes on one of these deliveries. He flies low, muttering to himself. Used to be, you dropped off a thunderbolt, maybe a prophecy. Now it's scented stationery and instructions for emotional journaling. He stops at a temple mid-ritual, lands in a puff of glitter, and hands a confused high priestess a basket of affirmations. You both watch in silence as she lights it on fire. Old habits die hard. Hermes sighs. Back on Olympus, Ares has had enough. He storms into Hera's old chamber during a council meeting, armor clinking like an aggressive wind chime. This is madness, he growls. We need order. We need honor. We need punching. Punching? Aphrodite asks, arching a well-plucked brow. Darling, we're past that. We're embracing our inner wounds. You are my inner wound, he snaps. There's an awkward silence. Somewhere, a harp string snaps in sympathy. It's at this point that the lesser gods start defecting. Hebe tries to quit ambrosia duty to explore her creative side. Nike, goddess of victory, opens a spa. Even Hestia, ever the calm hearth goddess, goes on a silent retreat, which suspiciously involves a boat and zero intent to return. Olympus is unraveling in lace and scented oils. Aphrodite decides the problem is visibility. So she arranges what she calls the parade of emotional transparency. It involves each god creating a float representing their deepest insecurity. You watch in stunned awe as Apollo rides a chariot of mirrors, whispering, "Am I just light with a melody?" While Athena follows on a float made entirely of unread books. Ares refuses to participate. He throws a spear at the float and storms off, muttering about honor and cardio. The mortals below are baffled. From their perspective, divine behavior now includes skywriting poems and random glitter storms. A shepherd in Arcadia claims his sheep now only respond to compliments. Another swears his crops bloom when he sings breakup songs. Historians are still divided on whether this era was real, divine policy, or a mass poetic hallucination. Some blame ergot. Others suspect divine mischief. A few just shrug and say, classic Olympus. Meanwhile, you're dodging floating hearts and scrolling through divine announcements posted near the Garden of Echoes. They're mostly requests for couples therapy or stylish curse reversals. One notice reads, "If your snake has turned pink and won't stop reciting limericks, please contact Apollo's department." And yet, it's not all terrible. You sit beside the fountain of gentle reminders, a new feature, and sip water that tastes faintly of chamomile and regret. There's a strange serenity in the madness. The gods, usually so rigid in their roles, are showing something else. Vulnerability, confusion, humanity, if such a thing can exist on Olympus, but it can't last. Because behind the petal-strewn courtyards and harp-backed confessionals, the fabric of Olympus is still fraying. Time hiccups, seasons blur. A festival in Thebes starts on a Tuesday and ends in the previous Thursday. People begin aging backwards or sideways. One evening, the stars refuse to align. Literally, astronomers look up and see constellations drifting apart like awkward X's at a wedding. Farmers panic. Poets rejoice. One guy writes a love letter to Orion's belt and mails it to the moon. You glance toward the horizon, and for a moment, you feel it. Hera's absence like a hollow pressure in the air. Not loud, but heavy. The kind of missing you don't notice until everything feels just slightly wrong. The gods start whispering. Even Aphrodite admits, under her breath, she knew how to keep the strings tight. And you? You're just here, floating through it all. A witness to the unraveling romance of divine order. You pat a peacock on the head, whispering, "I think she'll come back soon." The peacock side-eyes you and struts off. As night falls, you lie under the stars that no longer connect. The sky is wide, the air smells of roses and ozone, and somewhere in the distance, a divine therapy session ends in tears and a group hug. You wake up to a metallic clanging that rattles the columns. It's rhythmic, echoey, and, unfortunately, coming from the grand courtyard. As you tiptoe past a weeping willow that now seems to whisper compliments, you spot the source of the noise. Ares. And he's not alone. Standing in the center of a freshly dug pit is the god of war himself, shirtless, of course, flexing dramatically and announcing the first official day of the Olympian combat trials, which he describes as a return to order through glorious violence. You really wish someone would hand him a pamphlet on conflict resolution, but he's already too far gone, since the queen is indisposed. Ares booms. Olympus needs a new system, one where strength, courage, and the occasional tasteful explosion decide everything. Before anyone can object, he slams a golden trident into the ground Poseidon's, apparently borrowed without permission, and unfurls a scroll. It's a schedule. Monday through Thursday, combat events. Friday, tactical screaming. Saturday, wrestling with metaphors. Sunday, rest, but only if it's earned. Now here's the real kicker. The entire thing is being filmed. Or, well, painted. Hephaestus, lured by the promise of theatrics, is creating animated murals that display real-time action across Olympus. Welcome to Battle Vision. Historical note. While Ares wasn't the most beloved of gods, he was genuinely worshipped in Sparta, where ritual combat and physical dominance were central to religious expression. Some scholars argue that tales of his belligerence were exaggerated by poets with a grudge against cardio. Back to the madness. The first challenge? Shield yeet. Contestants hurl divine shields into a flaming hoop while reciting war poems. Points for form, passion, and if the shield explodes midair. Hermes competes ironically, quoting romantic limericks and scoring a perfect 10. Aphrodite throws a pillow instead, claiming it's a metaphor. You watch as Athena reluctantly joins, her eyes rolling harder than a temple wheelbarrow. Her shield curves gracefully through the air, neatly slicing a fruit bowl in half. Ares claps. Finally, some integrity. You try to sneak away. Unfortunately, Ares catches you. You there, mortal adjacent thing, ever thrown a javelin of destiny? You haven't. You say so. You will. The javelin is twice your height and hums with an energy that suggests it either likes you or wants to devour you. You breathe in, swing it back, and it lands in a bush. The bush bursts into applause, literal applause. It has enchanted leaves now. Ares calls it acceptable. Meanwhile, mortals on Earth begin misinterpreting omens again. A group of philosophers in Athens holds a debate over whether the sudden appearance of flaming vegetables is divine judgment or a seasonal anomaly. In Corinth, a mural of Ares games sparks a trend in competitive wedding duels. Invitations now read +1, plus armor. Even the constellations join in. Orion seems to flex a little harder. Sagittarius's arrow shifts slightly toward the Colosseum. Historians continue to debate whether celestial bodies were ever influenced by divine emotion, or whether the gods simply projected their moods onto the stars. Either way, there are more fireballs lately. As the tournament continues, so does the chaos. There's a three-legged chariot race featuring centaurs and talking boars. One team chants motivational slogans the entire time. Another just screams. Ares declares them both victorious. He introduces the trial of shouting, who can yell honor, the longest without blinking. Hermes wins by cheating. No one is surprised. You notice something else. Though slowly, grudgingly, the gods begin cooperating, sort of. There's a kind of wild camaraderie in the madness. Dionysus turns the arena into an after-party every night. Even Artemis shows up to critique archery form. Grumbling but present. The vibe shifts from chaos to organized chaos, which for Olympus is basically progress. Then comes the twist. Ares announces the final event. Throne worthiness. Contestants must sit on Hera's throne and deliver a speech convincing the gods why they should temporarily take her role. There's an audible gasp. The throne has always been sacred. No one touches it. Even Zeus avoids sitting there, unless Hera drags him in for performance reviews. But now it's open. Poseidon steps up first. He tries to argue that Olympus needs more watery discipline, but halfway through, a tidal wave of coffee bursts from the throne's armrest. He's politely escorted out. Athena speaks next, calm, composed, quoting laws older than time. The throne sighs. Literally, just sighs and reclines a bit. Everyone claps nervously. Then Ares climbs the steps. His armor gleams. His cape flutters dramatically thanks to a hidden wind machine installed by Hephaestus. He stands tall, plants his feet, and bellows, "Let Olympus become glorious in strife. Order through trial, strength above all." And the throne, it sneezes. A tiny burst of glitter explodes from the seat. Then it ejects him backward with a sound not unlike an offended peacock. You laugh. You try not to, but you do. Even Apollo giggles. Historians still wonder whether Hera's throne truly had sentience, or whether it simply reflected the mood of the gods who built it. Some say it only responded to true authority. Others believe it just had opinions. After the event, Ares disappears for a while. Rumor has it, he went to wrestle his feelings, literally, with a Minotaur therapist. Olympus quiets for a moment. The games are done. The murals fade. The gods wander off, sweaty, exhausted, oddly closer. Even without Hera, something like structure has returned, albeit through absurdity and flying shields. You sit by the now silent throne. It glows faintly in the twilight, humming with a waiting energy, as if it knows she's coming back. You whisper, "You miss her too, huh?" The throne doesn't answer. But the garden breeze nods. Poseidon is not a morning god. You realize this the moment he sloshes into the council hall at what he dramatically announces is unholy sunrise, dripping salt water everywhere, holding a trident that's been freshly polished and mildly overcompensating. His seaweed crown is askew. There's a fish still flapping around in one of his sandals. Enough with the hugging and gladiator games, he growls. Olympus needs plumbing. You blink. Order, infrastructure, hydraulic expansion, he clarifies, pounding the trident against the floor. I propose a water-based reformation of divine systems. Aphrodite mutters something about soggy aesthetics. Hermes whispers, please don't say aqueducts again. But it's too late. Poseidon is already unraveling a scroll longer than the Euphrates. The plan? Transform Olympus into a partially submerged paradise, complete with floating thrones, seashell communication systems, and a new dress code involving kelp. He calls it Project Aqualympus. Everyone else calls it Poseidon's wet midlife crisis. Historically speaking, Poseidon was god not just of the sea, but also of earthquakes and horses, an oddly specific resume. Some local cults even considered him a creator god, which might explain his current obsession with turning Mount Olympus into a water park for immortals. The first step in his plan: reroute the Nectar River through the banquet hall. You follow him as he summons giant fish to gnaw out channels through the marble. Hephaestus protests briefly, then gets distracted trying to waterproof ambrosia. Meanwhile, nymphs are assigned lifeguard duties. One of them immediately installs a whistle and declares a no running on the clouds policy. Mortals start receiving mixed omens again. A village near the Aegean reports a rain of sea cucumbers. A statue of Hera in a coastal temple begins weeping seawater. Philosophers argue whether this is symbolic punishment or divine plumbing mishap. One poet claims it's a metaphor for the grief of forgotten tides. His book sells 3 copies. Poseidon is undeterred. You can taste the discipline in salt, he announces, sipping brine from a chalice. Aphrodite rolls her eyes so hard they almost fall out. But the most ambitious part of Poseidon's plan is still to come. He proposes extending his jurisdiction beyond oceans, to include all flows: rivers, clouds, indoor fountains, coffee machines. Anything that burbles, he adds helpfully. Athena tries to argue the theological legality of this, but he's already halfway through drafting new commandments. You sneak a glance. Commandment 3 is just moisturize. He even commissions an anthem, the Ballad of the Brave Bidet. Apollo refuses to perform it, so Dionysus improvises with a harp and whale noises. But the real turning point? Poseidon decides to assert his influence over divine beverages. You arrive in the great feast hall to discover the nectar bar transformed into a juice lagoon. No cups, just conch shells and floating fruit platters. To access the espresso, you must wade through knee-high papaya water while being serenaded by shellfish. It's chaos. Athena slips on a mango. Demeter refuses to enter unless someone chlorinates the pool. Even Ares, still sore from his throne rejection, mutters something about dehydrated dignity. You climb onto a floating table next to Hermes, who's playing solitaire with waterproof cards. He's not wrong, he admits, watching a trout swim past, but his vibe is off. Then comes the plumbing apocalypse. Poseidon installs what he calls the sacred flush, a device meant to purify Olympus by periodically flooding it with truth-telling waves. It malfunctions almost immediately, dousing the entire mountain in truth serum-infused seawater. Every god within a mile radius starts blurting out secrets. Apollo admits he once auto-tuned a prophecy. Artemis reveals she sometimes names her arrows out of loneliness. Dionysus tearfully confesses he doesn't actually like wine. He's more of a tea guy. Even you, soaked and clinging to a kelp chandelier, mutter, "I never finished the Iliad." Poseidon is proud. "This is honesty," he roars, arms spread, soaked beard glistening like a Trident advertisement. This is unity through transparency. But the other gods have had enough. Athena calls an emergency meeting, this time in a dry room. The floor is scrubbed. The ceiling leaks slightly. Everyone's shivering. "We need balance," she says quietly. "We need Hera." The room stills. The word hovers like a lightning bug, buzzing just out of reach. Even Poseidon exhales, the tide in his hair slowing. There's a long, awkward silence. Then Hermes, ever the opportunist, stands. "Okay, but until she returns, let's, maybe, put a pause on aquatic renovations." Poseidon grumbles but nods. He retracts the sea cucumber fountains. The Nectar River is unrerouted. The sacred flush is dismantled and sent to Tartarus for observation. Mortals across Greece suddenly feel more grounded. Temples return to dry offerings. Sailors stop seeing dolphins reciting poetry. A barista in Athens reports her coffee machine no longer weeps at sunrise. But something's changed. You walk through Olympus that night, the moonlight glinting off half-flooded mosaics. The water recedes slowly, like an apology. Even the fish seem unsure. You pass Hera's throne. Someone's dried it off. A small seashell sits beside the cushion. It hums faintly, like a memory of order beneath the waves. You touch it, and for a brief moment, you hear the sea whisper, "Soon." You wake up, and the air smells like gossip. The kind that travels faster than sound, hotter than fresh ambrosia, and slightly more dangerous than Aries on leg day. You follow the scent, a strange mix of parchment, ink, and divine mischief, all the way to the central message courtyard, where Hermes is holding what appears to be an emergency product launch. A golden podium, a banner that reads, "Hermes, Prime, Chaos Delivered, E," and an army of identical delivery satchels. He taps a scroll, clears his throat, and announces, "Since traditional communication is currently, inconsistent, Olympus is proud to unveil an entirely new service. Personal delivery of news, rumors, dramatic sighs, and secret crushes. Guaranteed arrival within 30 minutes, or your next ambrosia scone is free." You blink. Somewhere, a goat applauds. "Look," Hermes says, pulling you aside. "With Hera gone, everyone's losing it. So I figured, why not monetize the drama?" He hands you a scroll. It's glowing. "Trial offer," it says. "One free scoop of divine chaos. Historically, Hermes was the god of communication, trade, travelers, and thieves. A multitasker by nature. He guided souls, carried messages between realms, and possibly invented the first prank war. Some myths suggest he was the only god who truly liked humans. He certainly understood their taste for drama. Back in Olympus, his service takes off instantly. Athena subscribes for objective updates only. Aphrodite signs up for the juicy secrets plus flirty font tier. Ares wants every message delivered with a battle cry. Even Hades from the underworld sends a note that reads, "Finally." A courier who doesn't get lost near the river Styx. Mortals? They're even more confused than usual. Priests in Delphi start receiving rapid-fire scrolls predicting conflicting futures. One temple gets 17 versions of the same prophecy, each with slightly sassier phrasing. A farmer in Thessaly hears a knock on his barn and opens it to find a glowing pigeon yelling about a love triangle on Mount Olympus. You try to keep up. Hermes ropes you into quality assurance. Your job: follow one satchel from dispatch to delivery. You shadow a messenger nymph who's got glitter on her wings and the intensity of someone who's memorized everyone's tea. She delivers one scroll to Artemis. Ares' secret poetry stash. Artemis doesn't blink. I already knew. Next, Poseidon. Update: your sacred flush has been downgraded to plumbing hazard tier 3. He grumbles and signs for it. Then Dionysus. Hey, did you actually invent karaoke? His scroll explodes in confetti. He winks. Depends who's asking. Every message triggers another ripple. More reactions. More responses. Olympus becomes a feedback loop of divine overreaction. You watch it spread like wildfire, or a viral tweet. There's something oddly comforting about seeing gods panic over misinterpreted emojis. But then, the system glitches. A highly confidential scroll meant for Athena lands in Apollo's lap. It contains her private theory that the sun might be overcompensating for cosmic insignificance. He doesn't take it well. He broadcasts a rebuttal across the sky, literally. You look up and see, "I contain multitudes," spelled out in light. The day lasts 19 hours. Farmers riot. A goat faints. Hermes scrambles. Okay, minor error. I can fix this. He can't. A second mistake sends Ares a message meant for Demeter. Planting new seeds of peace soon. He interprets it as a threat, declares martial law over the wheat fields. Even worse, a group of mortal teens start intercepting scrolls. They start a podcast, God Drop. It's wildly popular. The opening theme is just Ares yelling over a lyre beat. Historians still wonder if this strange episode marked the origin of divine satire. Some fragments suggest that comedians in ancient marketplaces once claimed they quoted the gods directly. Others think it was just bad wine. Meanwhile, Hermes tries to contain the spread by launching a software update Scrolls 2.0, now with magical self-destruct timers. You witness the first trial. A message delivered to Hephaestus bursts into flames halfway through reading. "I wasn't done," he mutters, eyebrows smoking. It only gets worse when the messages begin developing. Personalities. You walk into the Hall of Echoes and find two scrolls arguing about grammar. One refuses to be open unless addressed as your glorious paperiness. Another sings every sentence in falsetto. Hera's old diary starts sending passive-aggressive auto-replies. You begin to suspect the scrolls are evolving. Messages shouldn't be sentient, Athena says flatly. They're not sentient, Hermes insists. They're just emotionally aware. So is Ares. That's not comforting. Eventually, Olympus becomes impossible to navigate without tripping over a glowing envelope or scroll with legs. You spot one limping toward Aphrodite, carrying a tiny bouquet. It self-combusts in her presence. Typical, she sighs. You try to take a break, maybe find somewhere quiet, like the cloud archives. But even there, the scrolls rustle, whispering, plotting, possibly unionizing. Finally, Hermes calls it. Okay, so maybe I went too far. He shuts it down. One by one, the scrolls collapse, folding themselves neatly into little piles of ribbon and dust. Olympus exhales. Birds chirp. Someone finally finishes a sentence without interruption. Still, the damage lingers. Relationships are frayed. Secrets exposed. Trust bent like a poorly forged spear. And through it all, you feel Hera's absence like a heartbeat just out of sync. She was never the flashiest god, but she held things. You stand near her throne again that evening, watching shadows stretch long and cool across the marble. A forgotten scroll floats past. You catch it, blank, except for one line. She'd have never let this happen. You smile, then fold it and set it gently on the throne. You hear the hammering before you see the sparks. Rhythmic clinks echoing off the marble walls. Bright flashes that make even Apollo blink. Following the trail of steam and muttered swearing, you find yourself outside Hephaestus's forge, which now appears upgraded, significantly. The anvil's floating. The walls shift color depending on his mood, and the floor is made of glass under which a fire giant naps, occasionally belching flames that power the bellows. Welcome to Pur. Forge 2.0. Olympus's most experimental DIY zone. Hephaestus, soot-streaked and grumbling, waves a glowing wrench at you. Don't touch anything. Or do. Honestly, who cares anymore? Apparently, since Hera's gone and the rest of Olympus has tried running things their own bizarre ways, Hephaestus has decided to contribute by reinventing everything. His new mantra: function with flair. Take the thrones. They now levitate. Zippers have been added to togas for mobility. The council table rotates, slowly, for drama. He's not alone either. A group of minor deities, mostly forgotten, slightly bored, has joined his design renaissance. Together, they're producing what can only be described as mythological techwear. Artemis's quiver now sings lullabies. Apollo's lyre glows with mood lighting. Even Cerberus has booties with anti-skid soles. You step cautiously through the workshop, where hammers dance mid-air and blueprints scurry like rats. A mannequin in the corner models an enhanced toga with retractable sleeves and built-in snack pockets. You don't ask questions. Historically, Hephaestus was the god of fire, blacksmithing, and innovation. He crafted the weapons of the gods, from Zeus's thunderbolts to Achilles' armor. But what myths often gloss over is his loneliness, cast out, mocked, unloved by many of the very beings he armed. Now, in Hera's absence, he's taking his moment. And maybe, just maybe, overcompensating a little. His latest creation? A throne designed to be better than Hera's. Taller, sleeker, heated cushions, self-adjusting back support. He calls it the Omniseat. The inscription reads, "Comfort is authority." You watch him unveil it with great flourish. The gods are summoned. Athena raises an eyebrow. It looks sharp. "It's intentional," he snaps. Ares tests it. It adjusts to his posture and emits a low purring sound. He admits. Acceptable. Aphrodite refuses to sit. "I don't want my divine energy trapped in a massage algorithm." Poseidon pouts. "Does it float?" "No." "Then what's the point?" The real test comes when Zeus approaches. He lowers himself into the seat, which promptly scans him and announces, "User incompatible." "Try again." Apollo falls off his chair, laughing. Still, Hephaestus continues. He revamps the temple lighting, ambient, with flicker settings, installs ambrosia taps in the banquet hall, designs combat-friendly robes with adjustable hemlines. Every surface on Olympus becomes ergonomic. Even the mortals notice. Sculptors begin carving sharper, sleeker versions of the gods. A theater in Athens premieres the steam-forged Oracle, featuring a metal prophet who predicts the weather based on lava pressure. Scholars still debate whether it was satire or prophecy. But the tipping point? Hephaestus builds a new communications device. Small, disc-shaped, whisper-sensitive. He calls it the Alka Ecor Pod. stream your prayers, edit your blessings, curate your divine profile. You watch in horror as Hermes pairs his with winged earbuds and starts narrating his life. Day 47 without Hera. Olympus is weird. Soon everyone has one. Messages become curated, emotions filtered, even sacrifices are scheduled via app. You get a notification. You are now eligible for a 2-for-1 blessing bonus. Redeem by sundown. But the more efficient Olympus becomes, the less alive it feels. Athena observes this first. She stands in the hall of reflection, now updated with voice-activated mirrors, and murmurs, "We've streamlined the soul right out of it." She's not wrong. The temples grow quieter. The stars more orderly, but less poetic. Mortals begin offering digital hymns, perfectly tuned, perfectly lifeless. One priest writes an algorithm to automate rituals. It crashes during a lightning storm. The goats never recover. And Hephaestus? He feels it too. One evening, you find him alone in his workshop, the tools silent, the fire dimmed. "I thought I was fixing things," he mutters. "I thought she'd be impressed." He doesn't say who, but you know. You sit with him in silence. The air smells like warm iron and regret. Eventually, he hands you something small, a charm, forged from stardust and bronze. For Hera, when she returns, you take it. Later that night, you walk through the newly redesigned corridors, all smooth edges and glowing floors, and everything feels distant, precise, and deeply, painfully Hera-less. You pass the original throne, still untouched. The peacock feather remains. So does the silence. You clip the charm Hephaestus gave you onto one of the throne's armrests. It glows briefly, then dimensions. A heartbeat maybe, or just a glitch. But it feels right. Night falls strangely now. Olympus, once a buzz of drama, debate, and overly loud lyre solos, has grown quiet. Not calm, not peaceful, just muted. Like the gods are waiting for something, or someone, and they've finally run out of chaotic distractions to pass the time. You walk alone through the northern terraces, where silver leaves rustle in the windless air, and moonlight runs like spilled milk across the marble. That's when you see her. Artemis. Cloaked in starlight, standing absolutely still on a balcony, staring down at the mortal world, like she's guarding it with sheer force of will. Movement down, there's getting sloppy, she says without turning. The forests are restless. The animals aren't sleeping. They feel it too. You ask, feel what? She finally looks at you. Disorder. You follow her through a grove of moonlit olive trees, past a bubbling spring that now glows faintly pink, left over from Aphrodite's hydration campaign, and arrive at the Temple of Night. Artemis's favorite place, and now her command center. She gestures to a constellation map. It's a mess. Stars blinking in inconsistent rhythms. Galaxies crowding each other like confused tourists. The heavens are trying to rearrange themselves, she mutters. They're compensating. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, protector of wild things, and those who walk alone, rarely engages in politics. She's a creature of instinct, silence, and clean moonlight. But now, with Hera gone, even she feels the tug to intervene. So she does the only thing she knows. She imposes a curfew. At first, the other gods laugh. "What are we, teenagers?" Hermes says. "What's next? Celestial detention?" But Artemis doesn't joke. By sundown, the sky's dim. Stars shift into tight formation. Divine activity is limited to daylight hours. If anyone disobeys, they get the look. The the kind that freezes a charging boar mid-step and makes even Ares retie his sandals respectfully. You wander Olympus under the new restrictions. The quiet is eerie. No divine music. No dramatic monologues echoing off the cliffs. Just wind and distant hoots from owls patrolling the mountain like feathery security guards. The mortals notice almost immediately. In the city of Thebes, torches go out early. In Sparta, warriors whisper of dreams, visited by glowing deer with disapproving eyebrows. A child in Delphi draws a picture of the moon frowning. One poet writes, "Even the shadows are being watched." It becomes a bestseller. Artemis installs celestial patrols. Star wolves, cloud hounds, constellations that drift closer to monitor movement. The night becomes orderly, beautiful, but rigid, structured, safe, and yet, something's off. You walk through the Temple of Dreams, where offerings used to spill over in baskets. Hopes, fears, absurd requests scribbled on scrolls. Now the baskets are half empty. The mortals aren't dreaming as wildly. They aren't asking for miracles or rain that smells like cinnamon. They're sleeping on time, eating kale, and waking up early. Efficient. Boring. You bring it up to Artemis. She doesn't blink. They're safe. You try again. But are they free? There's a long pause. Finally, she sighs. Hera used to walk this line perfectly. She could tell the difference between order and control. A breeze passes. For a moment, it smells like rosemary and wet stone. Familiar, grounding. Hera's scent. You realize Artemis isn't angry. She's worried. She's holding the boundaries because no one else will. She doesn't want this role. But someone has to guard the night. Back on Olympus, curfew compliance is almost universal. Except Apollo. He refuses to dim for bedtime. You find him one evening halfway through composing his 8th ballad about rebellion, riding a chariot that glows like an overcaffeinated sunbeam. Artemis confronts him mid-sky. You witness it from a cliff, squinting through the brilliance. "You're disrupting circadian rhythms," she says flatly. "You're dimming divine expression," he shoots back. "You're glowing in my forest. You're suffocating the stars." They stare each other down, light versus shadow. Twin siblings bound by fate and deeply conflicting aesthetics. Eventually, they strike a deal. Apollo gets sunrise. Artemis gets moonset. They co-author a divine sleep playlist. It's mostly harp and passive-aggressive silence. You drift under that new sky, where structure pulses gently, like a heartbeat too cautious to dream. The gods comply. The mortals adjust. But the earth starts to itch. Volcanoes rumble with no schedule. Rivers veer off course. Crops bloom early, then wither. Nature begins throwing tiny tantrums, not destructive, but definitely annoyed, as if the world itself misses Hera's steady hand. Historically, there were festivals to Hera, not just as a wife or queen, but as a regulator of seasons, cycles, divine timing. Her presence wasn't loud. It was metronomic, sacred, invisible in the way gravity is, unglamorous but necessary. Without her, Olympus feels like a child trying to imitate its mother's handwriting. Neat, stiff, missing the curve of wisdom. One night, as you sit alone in the garden, a single olive falls beside you, gently, precisely. No wind, no movement. You pick it up. Etched in its side, barely visible, is a pattern you've seen before, the crest of Hera. A sign? Or just the garden remembering? You press it into the soil. The earth hums. Somewhere in the sky, a single star repositions itself, quietly, stubbornly, into its original place. You wake to music. Not the usual divine chorus or Apollo's daily sunrise solo. No, this is different. It's self-indulgent, silky, full of vocal runs and dramatic pauses that don't quite land. You follow the sound to the amphitheater of echoes, where a glowing stage has been erected overnight. A glowing, gyrotating icon stage. Aphrodite sits in the front row with popcorn. Ares sulks 2 seats behind her. Athena has earplugs. Even Poseidon, begrudgingly damp and mildly curious, leans on a trident-shaped snack stand. On stage, Apollo. He stands in a golden spotlight, robe cinched just right, lyre slung across his back like a smug accessory. Welcome, he purrs, to Let It the Voice of Olympus, a podcast for gods, mortals, and the divine curious. You blink. Podcast. Yes, he says, as if reading your thoughts. The mortal world has long worshipped through temples and offerings. But what they really crave? Content. You sit down slowly. Historically, Apollo was god of music, prophecy, poetry, and the sun. Essentially Olympus's overachieving arts major. His oracles were the most famous in Greece, and his temples doubled as performance spaces. But now, he wants to own the narrative. His first guest is himself. Today, he intones, we'll explore my own journey, from misunderstood solar boy to divine icon. He plays an intro theme, a 7-minute instrumental with backup muses, then launches into a monologue about resilience, skincare, and glowing from within and without. By minute 15, even Aphrodite looks tired, but Apollo's just warming up. He interviews other gods too, in what he calls deep chats with deep cuts. Ares appears on episode 2, mostly grunts. Demeter talks seasonal depression. Hermes leaks spoilers for next week's Ambrosia release. Even Dionysus gets roped in, offering advice on wine-based conflict resolution. But as the podcast spreads, echoing down temples, whispered through mortal dreams, picked up by birds who repeat sound bites out of context, something strange happens. The Chatorici gods start oversharing. Artemis records an episode on solitude that accidentally becomes a viral mortal sleep aid. Athena rants about misinformation, but it's cut into a lo-fi beat that charts in Corinth. Hades sends in a voicemail. No one's brave enough to play it. And Apollo? He's everywhere. You hear his voice in streams, in market stalls, in literal dreams. Mortals begin quoting him during weddings. One kid claims he saw Apollo in a toast, with sunglasses. The line between worship and fandom blurs. Mortals begin forming fan clubs. Some temples rebrand as content houses. One town renames itself Apollopolis. There's merch. There's fan fiction. There's chaos. You find Hermes backstage, frantically balancing scrolls. This was supposed to be therapy, he mutters, not a brand. He opens a scroll labeled Apollo's 30-day glow plan. He's selling enlightenment like it's skincare. And the worst part? Apollo starts referring to himself in the third person. Apollo believes in transparency, he says during a segment on divine boundaries. Apollo wants to empower your inner radiance. You rub your temples. The podcast episodes get longer, more self-indulgent, more abstract. By episode 10, Apollo releases a 4-hour ambient soundscape called The Essence of Me. It's mostly breathy sighs and slow harp glissandos. Even the stars begin dimming in protest. You walk through Olympus late one evening, the air thick with reverb. Every fountain whispers an Apollo quote, "Be your own sunrise. Shine, even if no one's watching. Always remember, it's not narcissism if it's true." You trip over a glowing stone. It sings, but the cracks are showing. Mortals begin questioning things. A shepherd complains his goats won't sleep because the night is too inspirational. A philosopher in Athens burns all his scrolls, muttering, "I've seen the truth, and it's heavily edited." The oracle at Delphi, Apollo's own mouthpiece, refuses to speak until someone gives her a week off and a bowl of soup. Back on Olympus, even the gods are fed up. He's turned Olympus into a TED Talk, Athena growls. It's like being smothered by sunshine, Artemis adds. Ares tries to challenge Apollo to a silence duel. Apollo accepts, then sings for 3 hours straight. But you start noticing something underneath the noise, a pattern. Every time someone mentions Hera, her fairness, her rituals, her steady hand, Apollo gets twitchy, changes the subject, cranks up the music, and you begin to wonder, maybe this podcast isn't just ego. Maybe it's a distraction. Maybe Apollo, bright and beaming, is secretly terrified that without Hera, the light is too loud. That in her absence, everyone's trying too hard to fill the silence. One night, you catch him alone, near the edge of the terrace. No audience, no lyre, just a cup of cold tea and tired eyes. "I thought if I kept talking," he says softly, "maybe we wouldn't notice." Notice what? That everything's missing her shape. You sit beside him. Neither of you speaks for a while. Eventually, he whispers, "She knew when to be loud, but she also knew when to just stand still and let the world settle." You nod. The next day, the podcast pauses. No announcement, no farewell, just silence. And in that silence, Olympus exhales. It begins with a pause, a real one. No music, no curfews, no divine monologues bouncing off Olympus's golden halls, just stillness. One morning, mortals awaken without any notifications. The stars don't realign. The fountains whisper nothing. Apollo's podcast feed? Empty. Something has shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of a season turning. You wander the edge of Olympus, where the clouds hang low and soft. There, tucked between ivy-covered columns, you find a new sapling. Young, strong, and growing in perfect symmetry. No one planted it. And yet, it's thriving. Beside it, a scroll. No signature. Only one phrase, inked in Hera's distinct, deliberate hand. Balance is not silence. It is listening. And Olympus begins to do just that. Aphrodite leads a festival, not for herself, but to honor small joys. Shared meals, peacock feathers, the color green. Artemis loosens the curfew. Mortals dream again. One child sends a letter, addressed simply, to Hera. "Thank you for the seasons." Even Apollo speaks less and sings softer. The gods don't say it out loud, but they begin adjusting, not for chaos or for order, but for rhythm. Her rhythm, not to replace her, but to make space for her return. And somewhere, perhaps just beyond the clouds, you feel it, a warm hum like breath on your cheek. The air smells faintly of rosemary and sun-warmed stone. You smile. The throne is still empty, but now it is waiting.